It's hard not to feel intrigued by a painting like this. In it, we see two naked women sitting in a bathtub. The one on the right is named Gabrielle d'Estrée, and beside her is another woman, presumably her sister, who, for no apparent reason, is pinching her nipple. This bizarre painting is one of the most famous works in French art, yet very little is known about its creation. The artist who painted it is virtually unknown, and we don't even know who commissioned it. But when it comes to its meaning, historians have long debated why she's pinching her nipple, and the conclusions they've reached are surprising. After watching this video, you'll realize how this small gesture completely changes the meaning of the painting. As I mentioned earlier, in this painting we see two women sitting in a bathtub with a cloth, presumably to keep the cold marble from touching their skin. To begin with, it's important to note that the habit of bathing around the year 1600 was not very common. Poor hygiene was widespread across all social classes for various reasons. Baths and saunas had long been banned by the church, as they were not considered compatible with Christian morals. They were places where it was far too easy to relax and to sin. They were also believed to be spaces where the devil operated. All of these places were associated with witchcraft and superstition because everyone knew that the devil would come, copulate with women in the bathtub, and then show them the face of their future husband. Just one of the many strange beliefs of the time. However, with the new aesthetic ideals of the Renaissance, paintings of nymphs rising from the waters, bathing naked in springs, had become fashionable, and many noble women wanted to be portrayed in this same way. Since they were considered indecent, many of these portraits were burned at the end of the century. On top of that, doctors at the time strongly advised against bathing. They claimed that full-body bathing was extremely harmful, that getting your feet wet was dangerous, and that under no circumstances should one keep their head submerged for long. In this case, it doesn't look like these women planned to wet their heads either. Just look at their elaborate and carefully styled hair. There are many mysteries surrounding this painting. To begin with, we don't even know who the artist was, only the school to which they belonged. We can only estimate the date of its creation, but we're not completely sure. However, we do know who the two women in the painting are. Let's begin with the blonde woman. She is Gabrielle d'Estrée, a French noblewoman born in 1573. At around 15 years old, she moved to the court of King Henry III of France, where she quickly became known for having various lovers. One of them was the Duke of Bellegarde. When Henry III died, his successor, Henry IV, had to face the wars of religion, and he spent nearly 20 years engaged in different conflicts. He himself was a Huguenot, which meant many of his Christian subjects did not support him. The Duke of Bellegarde, Gabrielle's lover, was the Grand Equerry and a man the king trusted deeply. One day, unknowingly changing the course of events, he introduced his lover to the king, Gabrielle d'Estrée. Henry IV fell for her instantly. Gabrielle embodied the beauty ideal of the time. Slim, blonde, with a pale complexion. Though it's worth noting that this paleness was not natural. The fashionable makeup of the era was extremely white, and it wasn't just applied to the face, but also to the chest, shoulders, and neck. Every woman aspired to have that golden blonde hair. To achieve it, they would spend hours in the sun, exposing only their hair while covering their face with veils and their hands with gloves to avoid any tanning. The woman beside her is Julienne d'Estrée, her sister, known as the Duchess of Villars. The family of these two sisters was notoriously referred to as the Seven Deadly Sins due to the number of scandals that surrounded them. Their mother had run away with her lover when the children were still very young. Another of the sisters had become an abbess but had to leave the convent after giving birth to 12 children from different fathers. Julienne herself was also surrounded by controversy. On one occasion, she reportedly ended up half naked in the middle of a church during a sermon given by a friar she was attracted to. Because of all this, many have speculated that the sisters may have had a lesbian relationship, and that this would explain Julienne's gesture of touching her sister's nipple. A red nipple, it's worth noting, since at the time it was fashionable to paint not only the lips, but also the nipples red as part of the beauty standards of the court. However, this is not the true secret of the painting. The truth is that this gesture symbolizes something far more significant than an incestuous relationship between sisters. But before we continue, let me remind you that this painting is available for you to collect and enjoy in your own home. In the description of this video, you'll find a link to a curated catalog featuring over 500 selected artworks where you can choose your favorite. You can even get it as a phone case if you prefer. Shipping is completely free, and by doing so, you'll be helping me continue to create videos like this without any external sponsorship. Thanks to your support, I'm able to keep producing new content every week. Thank you so much for being part of this project. You'll find the link below. Now, let's continue. Although we might instinctively imagine that this gesture has erotic connotations, it is very unlikely that this was its true purpose. Even though the pink silk curtains hanging above the scene may suggest something provocative, almost as if we, the viewers, are witnessing a private performance, such an interpretation would be misguided. To understand this gesture, we need to remember that the painting was created around 1594, roughly 5 years before Gabrielle's death, and perhaps just months before the birth of César de Bourbon, her first son with Henry IV. In fact, Gabrielle had 3 children with the king before she died in her late 30s, while pregnant with a fourth. The gesture of touching her nipple should be understood as a sign of pregnancy. Pinching the nipple was an allegory of fertility, possibly even a symbolic reference to the production of milk. This reading seems to be reinforced by the background scene, where we see a young woman sewing, perhaps preparing clothing or linens for the future child. Another hidden element in the painting is the ring Gabrielle wears on her finger. This was a gift from the king in 1599, 5 years after she gave birth to their first child. But it wasn't just any ring. It was the ring of investiture, the one Henry IV used to seal his legitimacy as King of France. By then, with no more wars to fight, Henry IV wanted to marry Gabrielle officially, but opposition came from every direction. The nobility did not want her as queen, as their relationship was born from double adultery. Both Gabrielle and the king were still married. The king ignored every warning, every insult, every sign of disapproval. He went ahead with the wedding preparations, which were so thorough and extravagant that it seemed he wanted to marry her as soon as possible. But suddenly, and under suspicious circumstances, Gabrielle fell gravely ill. She miscarried and not long after died. And this is where we must look again at the background of the painting. Many believe that it symbolically foretells Gabrielle's death. The heavy red curtain that falls dramatically behind the women resembles a stream of blood. Behind them, a mysterious woman watches the scene. Some have suggested she may be a witch, a sinister presence foreshadowing Gabrielle's fate. There's also a dark mirror, completely black, which reflects nothing. This absence of reflection has often been read as a sign of witchcraft. Of course, these are interpretations that historians have developed over the years, but I'd love to hear your own. What do you think this gesture truly means? Thank you for watching the video until the end. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you won't miss the next one. Visit Inspiragio.com to make your order, and I'll see you in the next video.